The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the general store in Jackson, Wyoming territory, and Sarah Patterson stepped down onto the dusty main street with trembling hands, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst right through her traveling dress. It was 1882, late September, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the wooden buildings that lined the street. She had come all this way from Philadelphia to start a new life, to escape the suffocating expectations of society back east. But now that she was here, standing in this frontier town surrounded by horses and cowboys and the wild, untamed land, fear gripped her throat like an iron fist. The driver was already unloading her trunk from the back of the coach. "Miss, you will be needing help getting to the boarding house. It's about 2 miles up the road." Sarah looked at the horses still hitched to the stagecoach, their large bodies shifting and stamping, their eyes rolling, their massive heads tossing. Her breath caught in her chest. "I can walk," she said quickly, perhaps too quickly. The driver scratched his bearded chin. "That is quite a walk with your belongings, miss. I could have someone drive you up there right quick." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. She softened her voice. "Thank you, but no, I prefer to walk." He shrugged, clearly thinking her an odd Eastern woman who did not understand the ways of the West. He set her trunk on the wooden boardwalk and tipped his hat before climbing back onto the coach. The horses lurched forward, and Sarah had to press herself against the storefront wall to keep from being too close to them as they passed. She stood there for a long moment, staring at her trunk, wondering how she was going to manage the 2 miles with all her worldly possessions packed inside. The town was busy with afternoon commerce. Cowboys rode past on their mounts, wagons pulled by teams of draft horses rumbled down the street, and everywhere she looked there were horses, horses, horses. "You look like you could use some help." Sarah turned to find a tall man standing a few feet away. He was lean and sun-bronzed, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore dusty work clothes, a worn leather vest, and a hat pushed back on his head. There was something gentle in his expression despite his rugged appearance. "I am waiting for someone," Sarah lied, not wanting to seem helpless or explain her situation to a stranger. The man glanced up and down the empty boardwalk, then back at her. "All right, then. You have a good day, miss." He touched the brim of his hat and started to walk away. Sarah watched him go, then looked back at her trunk, then at the long, dusty road stretching out of town toward the mountains in the distance. The boarding house was 2 miles. She could not stay here on the boardwalk forever. She would have to figure something out. "Excuse me," she called after the man. He turned back, patient and unhurried. "I do need help," Sarah admitted, her cheeks flushing. "But I do not have much money to pay someone to transport my things." "Was not asking for money," the man said, walking back toward her. "I've got a horse and wagon just down at the livery. Could have you and your trunk wherever you are going in no time." Sarah's stomach clenched. "I am afraid of horses," she whispered softly, the admission burning in her throat like shame. The man studied her for a moment, no judgment in his eyes, just a quiet understanding that made something in Sarah's chest loosen just slightly. "The boarding house up the north road," she nodded. "That is where I figured you might be headed. New arrivals usually stay there first while they get settled." He picked up her trunk as though it weighed nothing, settling it on his shoulder. "I will walk with you then." "But your horse," Sarah said, confused. "Horse can wait." "He is used to waiting on me." The man gestured down the street with his free hand. "After you, miss." They started walking together, leaving the bustle of the main street behind. The road north was quieter, lined with cottonwood trees that were just starting to turn gold with the coming of autumn. Sarah walked beside this stranger who had just agreed to carry her belongings 2 miles on foot rather than force her onto a wagon with horses. "I am Sarah Patterson," she said after they had walked in silence for a few minutes. "Zane Xerxes," the man replied. "Most folks just call me Zane." "That is an unusual surname. Greek. My grandfather came from the old country, kept the name even though it gave people trouble." He shifted the trunk to his other shoulder with easy strength. "You are from back east, Philadelphia. I came out here to take a teaching position at the schoolhouse. We have been needing a teacher. The last one married a rancher and moved out to his spread 20 miles from town. Hard to keep a school running when the teacher keeps leaving." Sarah heard the gentle humor in his voice. "I do not plan on marrying anyone. I came here for a fresh start, to have my own life and my own purpose." Zane did not respond to that, just kept walking at a steady pace that was slow enough for Sarah to keep up easily but fast enough that they were making good progress. The afternoon sun was warm on her face, and she could smell sagebrush and pine on the breeze. In the distance, the Teton Mountains rose up like jagged teeth against the blue sky, still snow-capped even in late September. "How long have you lived in Jackson?" Sarah asked, wanting to know more about this man who had shown her such unexpected kindness. "All my life. My parents were some of the first settlers in the valley. My father ran cattle until he passed 5 years ago. Now I manage the ranch with my younger brother, though he has been talking about heading up to Montana Territory to try his luck at prospecting." "You do not want to go with him?" "No, this land is in my blood, cannot imagine being anywhere else." Zane glanced at her. "What made you leave Philadelphia?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. "I was supposed to marry a man my parents chose for me. He was wealthy, respectable, and completely wrong for me. I could not bear the thought of spending my life as some decorative object in his house, hosting dinner parties and pretending to be happy. So I answered an advertisement for a teacher out west, packed my things, and left in the middle of the night. That took courage, or madness." Sarah smiled, but there was sadness in it. "My parents will never forgive me. Maybe not right away, but you have got to live your own life, not the one someone else wants for you." They walked on, and Sarah found herself relaxing in Zane's presence. He did not pry or judge, just listened when she spoke and gave her space to be silent when she preferred it. The road wound through a meadow where wildflowers still bloomed in patches of purple and gold. A creek ran alongside the road, its water clear and cold, tumbling over smooth stones. "Can I ask you something?" Zane said after a while, "of course. What made you afraid of horses?" Sarah's jaw tightened. She had known the question would come eventually. "When I was 8 years old, I was playing in the street near our house in Philadelphia. A carriage came around the corner too fast and the horses were spooked. They ran right at me. I froze. My older brother pushed me out of the way just in time, but he was trampled. He died 3 days later from his injuries." "I am sorry," Zane said quietly. "His name was Thomas. He was 12 years old, and he loved to read adventure stories about the West. He used to say he was going to come out here someday, be a cowboy or a mountain man." Sarah blinked against the sudden sting of tears. "I suppose in some way I came here for both of us. He would be proud of you." "Would he? I cannot even be near horses without feeling like I am going to be sick with fear." "Fear does not make you weak, Sarah. You are here, are you not? You came all this way by yourself, to a place you have never been, to start a new life. That is braver than most people ever manage to be." They crested a small hill, and Sarah could see a 2-story white house in the distance, surrounded by a neat fence and several outbuildings. Smoke rose from the chimney. "That is Mrs. Fletcher's place," Zane said. "She runs the boarding house." keeps a good table, and does not tolerate any nonsense from her boarders. You will be comfortable there." As they drew closer, Sarah could see a woman on the front porch, sweeping. She looked up as they approached and set her broom aside. "Zane Xerxes, what brings you out this way?" the woman called. She was in her 50s, sturdy and no-nonsense, with gray-streaked hair pinned up in a practical bun. "Brought you your new boarder, Mrs. Fletcher. This is Miss Sarah Patterson, the new schoolteacher." Mrs. Fletcher came down the porch steps, wiping her hands on her apron. "Miss Patterson, we have been expecting you. Your room is all ready. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted from your journey." Zane carried Sarah's trunk up onto the porch and into the house, following Mrs. Fletcher's directions to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. He set the trunk down carefully and turned to Sarah. "Thank you," Sarah said, meaning it more than she could express. "You did not have to walk all that way." "I did not mind. Besides, it was good conversation." Zane smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer, more open. "The schoolhouse is back in town, just off the main street. You cannot miss it. If you need anything, my ranch is about 5 miles west of town. Anyone can tell you how to find it. I hope I will see you again." "You will. Jackson is not that big a town." He tipped his hat to her and to Mrs. Fletcher, then made his way back down the stairs. Sarah watched from the window as he walked back down the road toward town, his stride long and easy. Something in her chest felt lighter than it had in months. Over the next few days, Sarah settled into her new life in Jackson. Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house was home to 5 other people, including Sarah. There was an elderly prospector named Harold, who spent most of his time talking about the gold he was going to find any day now. A quiet young woman named Emma, who worked at the hotel in town. A middle-aged clerk named Robert, who worked at the land office, and a young married couple, James and Lucy, who were saving money to buy their own homestead. Sarah found the schoolhouse exactly where Zane had said it would be. It was a simple building, one room with wooden benches for desks and a blackboard at the front. The school board consisted of 3 local men: Mr. Thornton, who ran the general store, Mr. Hayes, who owned the bank, and Reverend Miller from the church. They welcomed Sarah formally and told her that classes would begin the following Monday. She would be teaching children aged 6 to 14, about 20 students in total. Sarah spent her days preparing lessons and getting to know the town. Jackson was small but thriving, with all the essential businesses and a growing population of settlers and ranchers. Everyone she met was friendly, curious about the new teacher from Philadelphia, but not intrusive. She learned to navigate the town, though she still felt her heart race whenever horses passed too close. She saw Zane several times over that first week. Once at the general store where he was buying supplies and gave her a friendly nod. Once outside the church where they spoke briefly about the upcoming Sunday service. And once on the street when he was riding his horse and stopped to greet her. "You look well, Miss Patterson," he said from atop his mount, a large bay gelding with a white star on its forehead. Sarah kept her distance, standing several feet back from the horse. "I am settling in nicely, thank you. Mrs. Fletcher has been very welcoming." "Glad to hear it." "How is the schoolhouse?" "Perfect. Small but well equipped. I am looking forward to meeting my students on Monday." The horse shifted, and Sarah took an involuntary step back. Zane noticed. "Easy there, copper," he murmured to the horse, keeping him still. "Sarah, would you like to walk with me?" "I need to stop at the blacksmith, and I could use the company." "But your horse?" "I will walk him. You can walk with me." So they walked together down the street, Zane leading his horse, keeping the animal on his far side so there was always space between Sarah and the horse. They talked about small things, the weather turning cooler, the harvest coming in, the dance that was planned for the following Saturday night at the community hall. "Will you go?" Zane asked. "I had not thought about it. I do not really know anyone yet. You know me. And you will know your students by then and their families. It would be a good way to feel more a part of the community." He paused. "I could accompany you if you would like. Make sure you get there and back safely." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest. "I would like that very much." "Then it is settled." At the blacksmith shop, Zane arranged to have copper rishad the following day. Sarah waited outside, watching the smith work the forge, the orange glow of the coals and the ring of hammer on anvil. When Zane came back out, he walked her back toward the boarding house even though it was out of his way. "You are very kind," Sarah said as they walked, "to make accommodations for my fear. Most people back home thought I was being ridiculous, that I needed to just face my fear and get over it. Fear is not something you just get over. It is something you learn to live with, to work around. Maybe someday you will be ready to face it head on, but that is your choice, not anyone else's. Have you ever been afraid of anything?" Zane was quiet for a long moment. "After my father died, I was afraid I would lose the ranch. Afraid I could not manage it on my own, that I was not good enough or strong enough or smart enough. That fear nearly paralyzed me for months. Then one day I realized I had a choice. I could let the fear control me, or I could just do the work and see what happened. So I did the work. Some days I still feel that fear creeping back, but I know now that I can keep going even when I am afraid. That is very wise. Not wise, just stubborn." He grinned at her, and she found herself grinning back. They reached the boarding house as the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Zane did not linger, just wished her a good evening and headed back toward town with his horse. Sarah watched him go, feeling something warm and hopeful taking root in her heart. Monday arrived, and with it, Sarah's first day as a teacher in Jackson. She dressed carefully in a simple dark blue dress, pinned her blonde hair up in a neat bun, and walked to the schoolhouse with her lesson plans tucked under her arm. Her students were already waiting when she arrived, a mix of boys and girls ranging from small 6-year-olds to lanky teenagers. They watched her with curious eyes as she introduced herself. "Good morning. My name is Miss Patterson, and I am very pleased to be your teacher this year. I come from Philadelphia, which is very different from Wyoming territory, and I am looking forward to learning about this place from all of you just as much as I hope you will learn from me." The day went well. Her students were polite and eager, some more interested in learning than others, but all willing to give her a chance. She taught reading and writing and arithmetic, geography and history. During the lunch break, the children played outside and Sarah sat on the schoolhouse steps, watching them and feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what she had wanted, a purpose, a place where she mattered. The days fell into a rhythm. Sarah taught during the week, spent her evenings preparing lessons or reading, and got to know the people of Jackson. Saturday arrived, and with it the dance at the community hall. Sarah put on her nicest dress, a deep green silk that brought out the color of her eyes, and waited on the boarding house porch for Zane. He arrived just as the sun was setting, driving a small buggy pulled by a gentle-looking mare. Sarah's stomach clenched when she saw the rig. Zane must have seen the look on her face because he immediately pulled the buggy to a stop and climbed down. "I should have thought. I am sorry. We can walk if you prefer. It is 2 miles. I have got good boots." He smiled at her, and Sarah felt her heart flutter. She looked at the buggy, at the horse standing calmly in the traces, at Zane's open, honest face. "I want to try," she said, surprising herself. "If you stay with me, I want to try. I will be right beside you the whole time." Zane helped her up into the buggy, his hand warm and steady on hers. He climbed up beside her and took the reins, keeping the horse to a slow walk. Sarah gripped the edge of the seat, her knuckles white, her heart pounding. But Zane kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her stories about growing up in Jackson. And slowly, Sarah began to breathe easier. By the time they reached the community hall, she was not quite relaxed, but she was no longer on the verge of panic. Zane helped her down from the buggy and secured the horse to a hitching post. "You did well," he said quietly. "I was terrified. But you did it anyway. That is courage." The dance was already in full swing when they entered. The hall was full of people. Lanterns hung from the rafters casting warm light, and a small group of musicians played fiddle and guitar in the corner. Families had brought food to share, tables lined with pies and roasted meats and fresh bread. Sarah's students waved to her excitedly, and their parents came over to introduce themselves properly. Zane stayed close, introducing her to people she had not yet met, making sure she felt included. He danced with her twice, once a lively reel that left them both laughing and breathless, and once a slower waltz that brought them close together, his hand warm on her waist, her hand in his. "I am glad you came to Jackson," Zane said as they swayed to the music. "So am I," Sarah replied, and meant it. As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself relaxing, enjoying the music and the company. She danced with some of the other men from town, spoke with the women about the students and the school, and felt more a part of this community than she had ever felt in Philadelphia society. When it was time to leave, Zane brought the buggy around, and Sarah climbed in with only a moment's hesitation. The ride back to the boarding house was quiet, both of them tired and content. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. "Thank you for accompanying me tonight," Sarah said as they pulled up to the boarding house. "It was my pleasure." Zane helped her down, and for a moment they stood close together, his hand still on her waist. "Sarah, I would like to call on you properly, if that is acceptable to you." "I would like that very much." He smiled, that warm transformation of his face that Sarah was coming to treasure, and tipped his hat. "Sleep well, Sarah." She watched him drive away, her heart full, and knew that coming to Jackson had been the right choice. Over the following weeks, Zane called on Sarah regularly. He came to the boarding house on Sunday afternoons, and they would walk together through the countryside, talking about everything and nothing. He told her about the ranch, about his brother Marcus, who was 19 and restless, about his mother who had died when he was 15, and how much he still missed her. Sarah told him about her life in Philadelphia, about her parents' disappointment in her, about Thomas, and how she had carried the guilt of his death for so long. "It was not your fault," Zane said gently one Sunday as they sat by the creek, watching the water flow past. "You were a child. You could not have known what would happen, but he died saving me. And he made that choice because he loved you. Honoring that means living your life fully, not punishing yourself forever." Sarah leaned her head on Zane's shoulder, feeling the strength and warmth of him. "How did you get so wise?" "I told you, I am not wise, just stubborn." They smiled at each other, and Zane leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. Sarah did not want to. Their first kiss was gentle and sweet, and when they pulled apart, Sarah felt like her heart might burst with happiness. As autumn deepened into winter, Sarah and Zane's relationship deepened as well. They were courting officially now, and everyone in Jackson knew it. Mrs. Fletcher teased Sarah gently about blushing whenever Zane's name was mentioned. Her students giggled when Zane stopped by the schoolhouse to walk Sarah home. But it all felt right, natural, like pieces falling into place. Winter in Jackson was harsh, with deep snow and bitter cold. School continued, the children bundling up in layers to make the walk to the schoolhouse, and Sarah keeping the wood stove burning hot to keep the room warm. Zane came to town less frequently now, the demands of the ranch keeping him busy, but he managed to see Sarah at least once a week, and they wrote letters in between visits. On Christmas Eve, Zane came to the boarding house with a wrapped package. Sarah had a gift for him as well, a thick wool scarf she had knitted during the long evenings. They exchanged presents in the parlor, Mrs. Fletcher and the other boarders giving them space. Sarah unwrapped the package carefully and found a beautiful leather-bound journal inside, her initials tooled into the cover. "Zane, this is lovely. I thought you might like to write about your experiences here. Someday you could show your children, tell them about when you first came west." Sarah looked up at him, seeing the hope and love in his eyes. "Our children," she asked softly. "If you will have me, yes, our children." Zane took her hand. "Sarah, I know we have not been courting for very long, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your courage and your kindness and your determination. I love the way you care for your students and the way you make me laugh. I want to spend my life with you if you will let me." "Yes," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Zane, so much." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and Mrs. Fletcher let out a whoop of joy from where she had been eavesdropping in the hallway. The other boarders came rushing in, offering congratulations, and the evening turned into an impromptu celebration. They were married in early March when the worst of the winter had passed. The ceremony took place in the church with most of Jackson in attendance. Sarah wore a simple white dress that Mrs. Fletcher and Emma had helped her sew, and Zane wore his best suit. Reverend Miller performed the ceremony, and when he pronounced them man and wife, Zane kissed Sarah like she was the most precious thing in the world. The reception was held at the community hall, another dance with food and music and joy. Sarah danced with her husband, and the word felt strange and wonderful in her mind. Husband. Zane was her husband now. She was Mrs. Xerxes. That night, Zane brought Sarah to the ranch for the first time as his wife. The house was a sturdy log structure with 2 stories and a wide porch, surrounded by pastures and outbuildings. Marcus had moved into the bunkhouse with the ranch hands to give the newlyweds privacy, though he came to the main house for meals. "Welcome home," Zane said, carrying Sarah over the threshold. "Home." Sarah looked around at the simple, comfortable interior and felt a peace settle over her. This was home now. The spring passed in a haze of happiness. Sarah continued teaching, riding to school each day in the buggy with Zane until she felt comfortable enough to handle the reins herself. It was a gradual process, learning to trust the horse, learning to push past her fear. Zane never pushed, never made her feel weak or foolish. He just supported her, encouraged her, and celebrated every small victory. By the time summer arrived, Sarah could harness the horse herself and drive the buggy to school and back without help. She still felt nervous sometimes, still felt that flutter of fear when the horse moved unexpectedly, but it no longer controlled her life. In June, Sarah realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, then told Zane over dinner one evening, "I am with child." Zane dropped his fork, his face splitting into the widest smile Sarah had ever seen. "Truly, truly, the baby should come in February." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I am going to be a father, and I a mother." Sarah felt wonder and fear and excitement all tangled together. "I hope I will be good at it. You will be wonderful. Look at how you are with your students. You have so much love to give." That night, lying in bed with Zane's hand resting gently on her still flat stomach, Sarah thought about Thomas. She wished he could be here to meet her husband, to know that she had found happiness, to see the life she had built in the West he had dreamed about. But she felt his presence nonetheless, watching over her, proud of the woman she had become. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Sarah continued teaching through the fall, until she was too big to stand comfortably for long periods. The school board arranged for a temporary substitute, and Sarah spent her days at the ranch, preparing for the baby, cooking and sewing and nesting. Marcus had become a good friend to Sarah. He was tall like his brother but younger, with lighter hair and a quick laugh. He was restless, still talking about going to Montana, but he had delayed his plans to help with the ranch while Zane focused on Sarah and the coming baby. "You do not have to stay for us," Sarah told him one afternoon as they sat on the porch shelling peas. "I want to meet my niece or nephew before I go," Marcus said. "Besides, Zane will need help in the spring with calving. I can head north after that. You are a good brother. He is a good man. Raised me after Ma died, taught me everything I know. Least I can do is stick around a little longer." In February, as a blizzard raged outside, Sarah went into labor. Zane sent Marcus into town to fetch the midwife, Mrs. Carson, while he stayed with Sarah. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Sarah was certain she could not go on. But Zane was there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, telling her how strong she was, how much he loved her. Just after dawn, their son was born, a healthy baby with a strong cry and his father's dark hair. They named him Thomas Zane Xerxes, honoring Sarah's brother and his grandfather. "He is perfect," Zane whispered, holding his son for the first time, tears streaming down his face. "He is ours," Sarah said, exhausted and elated and more in love than she had ever thought possible. The first year of Thomas's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and precious moments. Sarah had never known she could love anyone as much as she loved her son and her husband. She returned to teaching that fall, bringing Thomas with her to the schoolhouse, where he napped in a cradle while she taught her students. The older girls took turns helping her with the baby, and it worked beautifully. Marcus left for Montana in the spring as planned, promising to write and visit when he could. The ranch kept Zane busy, but he always made time for his family, coming in from the fields to play with Thomas, to hold Sarah close, to remind her how much she was loved. When Thomas was 2, Sarah became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and the pregnancy felt easier, more comfortable. Their daughter was born in November, during the first snowfall of the season. They named her Lily Rose, and she was as beautiful as her name, with blonde hair like her mother and gray eyes like her father. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Sarah taught during the school year, managed the house, and raised her children. Zane worked the ranch, building it into one of the most successful operations in the valley. They attended church on Sundays, went to the town dances, and hosted dinners for their friends and neighbors. Marcus came back to visit every few years, full of stories about his adventures in Montana. He never settled down, never married, but he was a beloved uncle to Thomas and Lily, always bringing them gifts and tales of the wild country to the north. Sarah's relationship with horses continued to improve over the years. By the time Thomas was 5, she could ride, though she never loved it the way Zane did. But she no longer felt that paralyzing fear, and she was proud of how far she had come. One summer evening when Thomas was 8 and Lily was 6, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Thomas was reading a book about cowboys and outlaws, and Lily was playing with her doll. "Tell us again how you and Papa met," Lily demanded, as she often did. Sarah smiled at Zane, and he smiled back, the same warm smile that had captured her heart all those years ago. "Well," Sarah began, "I came to Jackson on the stagecoach and I was very scared. I did not know anyone and I was afraid of horses. But there are horses everywhere here, Thomas said, looking up from his book. Exactly. And your father saw me standing there with my trunk, not knowing what to do, and he offered to help. But Mama did not want to ride in a wagon, Lily chimed in, knowing the story by heart. No, I did not. So I told your father the truth. I am afraid of horses, I whispered softly, and do you know what he did? He walked beside her for miles instead, both children said in unison. 2 miles, Zane corrected with a grin, carrying that heavy trunk the whole way. And that is how we knew he was a good man, Sarah said, reaching over to take Zane's hand. Because he did not make fun of my fear or try to force me to face it. He just walked beside me and carried my burden. That is what you do when you love someone, Zane said, looking at Sarah with the same love and devotion he had shown her since that first day. You walk beside them, no matter how far or how long. Thomas wrinkled his nose. You two are always being mushy. Lily giggled. I think it is nice. As the sun sank below the mountains and the stars began to appear, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had left Philadelphia in fear and desperation, running from a life she did not want. She had arrived in Jackson terrified, carrying trauma and grief she had never properly dealt with. But she had also arrived with hope, with courage, with a determination to build something new. And she had found Zane, a man who saw her fear and met it with compassion, who valued her strength and supported her weakness, who loved her completely and without reservation. Together they had built a life, a family, a home. The years continued to pass. Thomas grew into a tall, serious young man who loved the ranch and wanted nothing more than to work it with his father. Lily grew into a spirited, intelligent girl who announced at 12 that she wanted to be a teacher like her mother. Sarah continued teaching, becoming a fixture in Jackson, educating 2 generations of children. When Sarah was 40, her parents finally wrote to her. The letter was stiff and formal, but it was an olive branch nonetheless. They acknowledged that she had been right to follow her own path, that she seemed to have built a good life. Sarah wrote back, including a photograph of her family, and a tentative correspondence began. Marcus eventually settled down, marrying a widow in Montana and taking on her 3 children as his own. He wrote that he finally understood why Zane had been so content to stay in one place, why putting down roots mattered. He brought his family to visit Jackson, and the cousins became fast friends. The ranch continued to prosper. Zane hired more hands, expanded the herd, and bought additional land. But he never lost sight of what mattered most, his family. No matter how busy the ranch kept him, he always made time for dinner together, for Sunday rides, for sitting on the porch in the evening and talking about the day. Sarah watched her children grow with pride and wonder. Thomas married at 21, a kind young woman named Catherine who had grown up on a neighboring ranch. They built a house on the Xerxes property and started their own family. Lily went to teacher training school in Cheyenne and came back to take over the Jackson schoolhouse when Sarah finally retired at 50. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Zane surprised Sarah with a trip. They left the ranch in Thomas's capable hands and took the train east to Philadelphia. It was Sarah's first time back since she had left in the middle of the night all those years ago. Her parents were old now, her father retired, her mother frail. But they welcomed Sarah and Zane into their home, and over the course of a week, old wounds began to heal. Sarah's mother cried when she apologized for not understanding, for pushing Sarah toward a life that would have made her miserable. Sarah forgave her, knowing that her parents had only wanted what they thought was best. They visited Thomas's grave, overgrown now but still maintained by her parents. Sarah laid flowers and told her brother about the son she had named for him, about the life she had built in the West he had dreamed of. Zane stood beside her, solid and supportive, and Sarah felt the last piece of her past fall into place. When they returned to Jackson, it felt more like home than ever. The mountains welcomed them back, the ranch was thriving, and their children were waiting with hugs and stories about everything that had happened while they were gone. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle disease and market fluctuations, arguments and misunderstandings, and all the normal struggles of life. But through it all, Sarah and Zane faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year. When Sarah was 55, tragedy struck. Marcus was killed in a mining accident in Montana, crushed by a cave-in. Zane was devastated, and Sarah held him while he grieved for the brother he had raised, the boy who had become a man, the friend he had lost. They brought Marcus's widow and children to Jackson for the funeral. The whole town turned out to pay their respects. Afterward, Marcus's widow decided to stay in Jackson, wanting to be closer to family, and bought a small house in town. Her children grew up alongside Sarah and Zane's grandchildren, and the family grew even larger. Thomas and Catherine had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Lily married a rancher named David when she was 25, and they had 3 daughters. Sarah and Zane's house was constantly full of grandchildren, noise and laughter and chaos and love. As they grew older, Zane and Sarah began to slow down. Zane handed more and more responsibility for the ranch over to Thomas, though he still rode out every day to check on things. Sarah spent her days reading, sewing, and spoiling her grandchildren. They took walks together every evening when the weather was good, hand in hand, talking or comfortable in silence. "Do you ever regret it?" Zane asked one evening as they walked. "Leaving Philadelphia, coming out here, marrying me?" Sarah looked at her husband, this man who had walked beside her for miles on the day they met, who had walked beside her through life ever since. His hair was white now, his face weathered by years in the sun, but his eyes were the same storm gray, and they still looked at her with the same love. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. This has been the life I was meant to live. You are the man I was meant to love. I would not change anything." "Good." Zane brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently, "because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children and grandchildren, the house bursting with family. There was food and music and dancing, just like that first dance in the community hall all those years ago. Sarah danced with Zane, and though their steps were slower now, the love between them burned as bright as ever. When Sarah was 68, Zane fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, and by winter it had developed into pneumonia. The doctor did what he could, but Zane's lungs were damaged from years of dust and smoke, and he could not fight off the infection. Sarah nursed him through the winter, sitting by his bedside, reading to him, holding his hand. Thomas and Lily took turns staying at the house, helping their mother, saying goodbye to their father. The grandchildren came to visit, standing solemnly by the bed, telling their grandfather they loved him. In March, as the snow was beginning to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, Zane called Sarah to his side. "I do not want to leave you," he said, his voice weak. "I know." Sarah's tears fell onto their joined hands. "I do not want you to go, but I will be all right. You taught me how to be strong, how to face my fears. I will miss you every day for the rest of my life, but I will be all right." "You were the best thing that ever happened to me," Zane whispered. "From that first day when you whispered that you were afraid, I knew you were special. I knew I wanted to walk beside you for as long as I could. And you did. You walked beside me through everything, Zane. You made my life beautiful. Tell Thomas to take care of the ranch. Tell Lily to keep teaching. Tell the grandchildren I love them. I will, but you can rest now. I have got this. We will all be all right. Zane smiled, squeezed her hand one last time and closed his eyes. He passed peacefully in his sleep that night, with Sarah holding his hand, his children keeping vigil in the next room. The funeral was the largest Jackson had ever seen. Zane had been a pillar of the community, respected and loved by everyone who knew him. They buried him in the town cemetery next to his parents with a view of the mountains he had loved so much. Sarah grieved deeply, but she did not fall apart. She had learned too much, grown too strong. She stayed at the ranch house, though Thomas and Catherine offered to have her move in with them. She wanted to be in the place where she and Zane had built their life, where his presence still lingered in every room. She continued her daily walks, though now she walked alone. She visited Zane's grave every week, bringing flowers and telling him about the family. The grandchildren visited often, and Sarah delighted in watching them grow and thrive. When Sarah was 72, Lily gave birth to her first grandchild, making Sarah a great-grandmother. Holding the tiny baby girl, Sarah thought about the journey she had taken, from that frightened young woman stepping off the stagecoach to the matriarch of a large, loving family. She thought about Thomas, her brother who had saved her life and lost his own. She thought about Zane, who had shown her what love really meant. She thought about all the moments of fear and courage, joy and sorrow that had made up her life. One spring day when Sarah was 75, she took her usual walk to the creek. The wildflowers were blooming, purple and gold, just like they had been on that first walk with Zane. She sat on the same rock where they had sat together so many times, where he had told her that her fear did not make her weak, where they had shared their first kiss. Sarah closed her eyes and could almost feel Zane beside her, solid and real. She could hear his voice, see his smile, feel the warmth of his hand in hers. "I am not afraid anymore," she whispered to the wind, to the mountains, to wherever Zane was now. "You taught me that. You walked beside me until I learned to walk on my own, and when I come to walk beside you again, I will be ready. But not yet. There is still more living to do." Sarah opened her eyes and looked out at the land she had come to love, the wild, beautiful country that had become her home. She thought about her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about the students she had taught, about the life she had built from fear and courage and love. She stood up, brushed off her skirt, and started walking back to the ranch house. The sun was warm on her face, and her steps were steady and sure. She had miles to go yet, but she would walk them with the strength Zane had helped her find, with the love they had built together, with the knowledge that she had lived a good life and it was not over yet. That evening, sitting on the porch with Lily and her daughters, watching Thomas work with his sons in the corral, Sarah pulled out the leather journal Zane had given her on their first Christmas together. She had filled it over the years with memories, stories, moments she wanted to preserve. Now she turned to a blank page and began to write. "My name is Sarah Patterson Xerxes, and this is the story of my life. It begins on a dusty street in Jackson, Wyoming territory, in the autumn of 1882, when I stepped off a stagecoach more frightened than I had ever been. It begins with a whispered confession to a stranger. 'I am afraid of horses,' I said softly, and he did not laugh or judge. He simply picked up my trunk and said, 'I will walk beside you then.' Those words, that kindness, that moment changed everything. This is the story of the man who walked beside me for miles, and then for a lifetime. This is the story of the love we built, the family we raised, the life we made together in this wild, beautiful place. And it is a good story, full of joy and sorrow, fear and courage, but most of all, full of love." Sarah looked up from her journal to see a rider approaching the house. As he got closer, she saw it was one of Thomas's sons, her grandson Daniel, who was 18 now and working the ranch full-time. He waved to her and she waved back, thinking how much he looked like Zane had at that age. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Sarah smiled. She was surrounded by family, by love, by the legacy she and Zane had created together. She was no longer the frightened young woman who had arrived in Jackson all those years ago. She had become something more, someone stronger, someone brave enough to face her fears and wise enough to know when to ask for help. And though Zane was gone, he was with her still, in the land they had worked together, in the children they had raised, in the love that would continue long after she herself was gone. He had walked beside her for miles on that first day, and he had kept walking beside her for 47 years. Now it was her turn to walk on without him, carrying their love forward, sharing their story, showing their descendants what it meant to face fear with courage and meet life with love. The stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and Sarah felt at peace. Her life had been good, full, rich with meaning and connection. She had come to the West running from fear and had found everything she had never known she wanted. She had learned to be brave, to be strong, to love deeply and without reservation. As she sat there on the porch of the ranch house, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, Sarah knew that when her time came to join Zane, she would go without fear. But for now, she was content to sit and watch the stars come out, to feel the cool evening breeze on her face, to listen to the voices of her family talking and laughing around her. She had walked a long road from Philadelphia to Jackson, from fear to courage, from loneliness to love. And every step had been worth it. Every moment had led her here, to this place, to this life, to this love that would echo through generations. Sarah closed her journal, stood up from her rocking chair, and went inside to join her family for dinner, ready for whatever miles remained ahead of her, knowing she had the strength to walk them, knowing that in the deepest parts of her heart, Zane would always be walking beside her still.